It was a typical Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, later than usual due to a long meeting that ran over. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had nearly set, casting long shadows across the quiet street. I gathered my things from the passenger seat and made my way up the front path, fumbling with my keys in the dim light. As I approached the door, I noticed something odd. The porch light was off, which was unusual since I always left it on before leaving for work. I brushed it off, assuming the bulb had probably just burned out. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, flicking on the entryway light. I hung up my coat and kicked off my shoes, ready to unwind after a long day. But as I turned to head into the living room, I froze. There, on the hardwood floor, was a single, muddy footprint. It looked fresh, the edges still glistening, and it was facing towards the hallway that led to the bedrooms. My heart began to race as I stood there staring at the footprint. I lived alone. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the house. I listened intently, straining to hear any sound of movement, but the house was silent. Cautiously, I crept forward, following the direction of the footprint. As I got closer to the hallway, I noticed another one, and then another. They led straight to my bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. With a shaking hand, I slowly pushed open the door. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside the window. I fumbled for the light switch, my heart pounding in my ears. As the room flooded with light, I let out a strangled gasp. My bedroom was in complete disarray. Drawers hung open, clothes strewn across the floor. The mattress was askew, sheets ripped off and tossed aside. And there, in the center of the room, was a large, dark stain on the carpet. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. That's when I heard it. A creak, coming from the floorboards in the hallway. I spun around, just in time to see a shadow move across the wall. Someone was still in the house. Panic rising in my throat, I raced for the front door, my feet slipping on the hardwood. I could hear heavy footsteps behind me, getting closer. I yanked open the door and sprinted outside, running straight for my car. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I glanced back at the house. And there, standing in the open doorway, was a figure, tall and broad, face obscured by the shadows. I slammed on the gas, tires screeching as I peeled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I watched as the figure stepped out onto the porch, still as a statue, watching me flee. I didn't stop driving until I reached the police station, tears streaming down my face. They never did find out who had broken in that night. The police said there was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, no clues left behind beside the muddy footprints. Even now, weeks later, I still can't shake the feeling of being watched, of not being safe, even in my own home. I don't know if I'll ever truly feel secure again. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and I was walking home from work, just like any other day. I live in a pretty typical suburban neighborhood. Rows of cookie-cutter houses, manicured lawns, the occasional barking dog. It's the kind of place where nothing much ever happens. As I turned onto my street, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked a few houses down from mine. It was an old, beat-up sedan, rusty around the edges. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably just someone visiting one of the neighbors. I was about halfway to my house when I heard the car door open behind me. I glanced back and saw a man get out. He was wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, hands in his pockets. Something about the way he moved made me uneasy. His gait was odd, kind of shuffling and jerky. I quickened my pace a bit, eager to get inside. That's when I heard his footsteps behind me, getting closer. My heart started to race. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was probably just going to one of the other houses. But then, I heard him speak. "Hey!" he called out, his voice raspy. Got a light?" I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard him, but his footsteps were getting faster now, closing the distance between us. "Hey!" he said again, louder this time. "I'm talking to you." I could see my house now, just a few doors down. So close. I fumbled in my pocket for my keys, my hands shaking. I could hear him right behind me, his breathing heavy. I reached my front steps and bounded up them, finally getting my keys out. But as I tried to jam them into the lock, I dropped them. They clattered to the ground, and in the second it took me to grab them, he was there, right behind me. I could feel his presence, smell the cigarette smoke on his clothes. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see his face. I just kept struggling with the lock, my heart pounding in my ears. "Don't be rude," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I just want to borrow a light." I finally got the door open and practically fell inside, slamming it shut behind me. I locked it immediately and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. I could hear him on the other side, just standing there. Then, after what felt like an eternity, I heard his footsteps slowly retreating. I went to the window and peeked through the curtains. I watched as he walked back to his car and got in. He just sat there for a while, not moving. I was terrified he was going to get out again, come back and try to break in. But eventually he started the engine and drove away. I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. No crime had actually been committed. They said they'd keep an eye out, but I knew they wouldn't. Not really. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept replaying it over and over in my mind. The sound of his footsteps, the smell of smoke, the fear that had gripped me. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that he would be back. And I was right. Because the next evening when I got home from work, there was a cigarette lighter sitting on my doorstep, just waiting for me. It was a quiet Sunday evening and I was walking home from my friend's house. We had been studying for midterms and lost track of time. By the time I left, the sun had already set, and the streetlights were flickering to life. I only lived a few blocks away, in a sleepy suburban neighborhood, so I didn't think much of it. As I turned onto my street, I noticed how empty it was. Usually there were a few cars parked along the curb, but tonight there were none. The houses all looked dark too, like everyone had gone to bed early. I shrugged it off and kept walking, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness. About halfway down the block, I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like someone shuffling their feet on the pavement. I glanced over my shoulder but didn't see anyone. Just the empty street stretching back the way I'd come. I quickened my pace a little, feeling a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. A few seconds later, I heard it again. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Closer this time. I spun around, my heart starting to race, but still there was no one there. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and thin in the darkness. No answer. I turned back around and nearly broke into a run. My house was just a few more yards away. As I hurried towards it, I heard the shuffling footsteps again. Faster now, like someone was jogging to catch up with me. I risked another glance behind me, and this time I saw a figure, a dark shape, moving towards me with purposeful strides. Panic rising in my throat, I sprinted the last few steps to my front door, fumbling with my keys. I could hear the footsteps getting closer, louder, until they sounded like they were right behind me. I finally got the door open and practically fell inside, slamming it shut and locking it with shaking hands. I stood there in the dark entryway, trying to catch my breath, listening for any sound from outside. But there was only silence. After a minute, I cautiously peered out the front window, but the street was empty again. No sign of the figure that had been chasing me. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, that I was just spooked from walking alone in the dark, but deep down, I knew what I had heard and seen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it had wanted something from me. Something bad. The next morning, I asked my neighbors if they had seen or heard anything strange the night before. They all looked at me oddly and shook their heads. "It was quiet as a grave last night," one of them said. "Not a soul stirring." But as I walked to class that day, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder every few steps, half expecting to see that dark figure again. And even now, weeks later, I still get a chill down my spine whenever I have to walk home alone at night. Because I know that there's something out there in the darkness, something that's waiting and watching, and I pray I never cross its path again. It was a quiet Saturday evening, and I was walking home from my friend's house. We had been studying for an exam and lost track of time, so it was later than I usually headed home, probably around 11 p.m. I only lived about a mile away, in the same sleepy suburban neighborhood, so I didn't think much of it. I had walked this route hundreds of times before. As I turned onto my street, I noticed how unusually dark it seemed. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then I realized what was off. Almost all the streetlights were out. Only one or two cast dim, flickering pools of light on the sidewalk. The rest of the street was draped in shadow. A chill ran through me despite the warm spring air. I walked a little faster, my shoes scuffing on the pavement. The sound seemed too loud in the stillness. I could see my house, halfway up the block on the left. Only a few minutes more, and I'd be inside, safe and sound. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable slap of footsteps behind me. I glanced back, my heart already starting to race, but I didn't see anyone. The street was empty. I must have imagined it, I told myself. Just my mind playing tricks in the dark. I kept walking, but now there was a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. As I passed under one of the few working streetlights, I heard it again. Footsteps. Closer this time. I whipped my head around and caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of the light. The shadowy outline of a person before they melted back into the darkness. "Hello!" I called out, hating the tremor in my voice. "Is someone there?" Silence. Even the crickets seemed to have gone quiet. I stood frozen for a moment, straining my eyes to see into the shadows. Nothing moved. With a shaky breath, I turned back around and hurried up the street toward my house. I was only a few doors down when I heard a crunch of gravel on the road behind me. I didn't look back this time. I broke into a run, my backpack slamming against me with each stride. I could hear the footsteps again, louder and faster, matching my pace. My chest burned as I sprinted the last few yards to my driveway. I fumbled in my pocket for my keys, looking back over my shoulder for the first time. In the faint glow from my porch light, I saw a figure standing at the end of my driveway, unmoving, watching me. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted to my front door, shoved the key into the lock, and practically fell inside. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it with shaking hands. For a minute, I just stood there in the dark entryway, trying to catch my breath, listening for any sound from outside. I finally gathered my courage and peered out the front window from behind the curtain. The street was empty again. Whoever had been there was gone. If they were even real and not just a figment of my overactive imagination. I tried to convince myself it was nothing as I checked the locks again and headed upstairs. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the echo of footsteps ringing in my ears. I didn't sleep well that night, and the next morning, in the light of day, I found a single muddy footprint on my front step. It was late, close to midnight, as I drove home from my shift at the hospital. I'm a nurse, and I often work odd hours, so navigating the quiet streets at night was nothing new. But this particular evening felt different somehow. An unsettling stillness hung in the air, broken only by the steady hum of my car's engine. I turned onto my street, the dim glow of the street lamps casting eerie shadows across the pavement. That's when I noticed it. A dark figure standing motionless on the sidewalk, just a few houses down from mine. At first, I thought it might be a trick of the light, but as I drew closer, the silhouette remained unmoving. My heart began to race as I pulled into my driveway, my eyes never leaving the mysterious figure. I sat in my car for a moment, debating whether to make a dash for my front door, wait to see if the person would move on. Just as I reached for the handle, the figure turned and started walking slowly in my direction. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. I could hear the steady footsteps growing louder, closer. Finally, the lock clicked, and I practically fell into my house, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, listening for any sound from outside. Minutes passed in silence. I cautiously peered through the peephole, but the street was empty. No sign of the figure. I let out a sigh of relief, convinced that my exhaustion had gotten the best of me. I must have imagined it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, a soft tapping sound caught my attention. It seemed to be coming from the window. I sat up, straining to hear over the pounding of my own heart. The tapping continued, growing more insistent. I slowly got out of bed and crept towards the window, my breath catching in my throat. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I grasped the edge of the curtain. I took a deep breath and yanked it back, revealing nothing. Just the still, dark street below. I shook my head, laughing at my own paranoia. I must be more tired than I thought. As I turned to go back to bed, a glint of something caught my eye. There on the windowsill was a small silver object. I picked it up, my blood running cold as I realized what it was. A hospital ID badge. My hospital ID badge. The one I always kept clipped to my scrubs. But that was impossible. I had my badge with me, didn't I? I raced to my bedroom, rummaging through my work bag, my pockets, anywhere I might have left it. But it was nowhere to be found. I looked back at the badge in my hand, a chill running down my spine, as I read the name printed on it. Emily Johnson. Emily Johnson. That was my name. But as I stared at the photo on the badge, my breath caught in my throat. The woman in the picture wasn't me. She had my name, my job, but her face. Her face was one I had never seen before, and yet somehow it seemed all too familiar. It was late, close to 11 p.m., and I was driving home from a friend's house across town. I don't usually take the back roads, but I thought it would be a quicker route at that time of night. Less traffic, more direct. The streets were narrow and winding, lined with old houses set far back from the road. As I turned onto Maple Avenue, my headlights flashed across a figure walking along the side of the street. It was a woman in a long coat, moving slowly with her head down. Something about the way she was walking, almost shuffling, made me uneasy. I slowed down as I passed her, glancing in my rearview mirror. She had stopped and was staring at my taillights as I drove away. A few minutes later, I saw her again. Same coat, same strange gait. But how did she get ahead of me? I knew I hadn't passed her again. A chill ran through me, and I pressed on the gas, eager to get home. The houses thinned out, and the road curved sharply. As I rounded the bend, my heart nearly stopped. There she was, standing in the middle of the street, coat billowing around her in the wind. I hit the brakes hard, swerving to avoid her. She didn't move, just stood there staring at me, face obscured by shadow. I sat there gripping the wheel, engine idling. She began walking toward my car, slowly, deliberately. I couldn't see her face, but I could feel her eyes on me. Panicking, I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas, tires squealing as I backed up and turned around. In my rearview mirror, I saw her still standing there in the street, watching me. I took the first turn off Maple, heart pounding. I just wanted to get away, to get home. But every street I turned down, there she was. Walking along the sidewalk, standing under a streetlight, waiting around a corner, always watching me. I was practically hyperventilating, hands shaking. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. How was she everywhere? I made a wild turn onto a street I didn't recognize, just trying to get away. Suddenly, my headlights illuminated a dead end ahead. I slammed on the brakes, looking around wildly, and then I saw her emerging from the shadows, walking toward me. I was trapped. She reached my car, and I finally saw her face. Pale, gaunt, with dark, sunken eyes. She reached out a hand, and I heard the click as she pulled on the door handle. In my terror, I hadn't even locked the doors. I screamed as the door opened, waiting for the feel of her hands, the sound of her voice. But there was only silence. I risked a glance and saw the seat next to me was empty. She was gone. I don't remember the drive home. I don't even know how I got there. I stumbled into my house, locking the door with trembling fingers, and collapsed on the couch. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I keep telling myself it wasn't real, that it couldn't have happened, but I can still see her face in my mind. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I think I catch a glimpse of a figure in a long coat, watching me from the shadows. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I was walking home from work, just like I always do. I only live about a mile from the office, so I usually enjoy the fresh air and bit of exercise, instead of dealing with traffic. My route takes me through a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nice houses, well-manicured lawns, the occasional dog walker. I was about halfway home, lost in thought, when I noticed a car crawling along the street behind me. It was an old sedan, faded blue paint, dented up a bit. Not the kind of car you usually see in this neighborhood. I didn't think much of it at first, figuring they were probably just looking for a house number. But after a couple minutes, I realized the car was keeping pace with me, staying about a half a block back. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I'd see it there, just creeping along. A tingle of unease started to build in my stomach. I picked up my pace a bit, and sure enough, the car sped up too, engine revving. My heart started to race, and my palms felt sweaty. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, thinking I should call someone, but then I hesitated. Maybe I was overreacting. It could just be a coincidence, right? I didn't want to freak out over nothing. I decided to test it. At the next intersection, instead of continuing straight toward home, I abruptly turned right. The car turned right. Pulse pounding in my ears now, I sped up to a jog. The car accelerated. Panic rising in my throat, I broke into a full sprint. Behind me, tires squealed as the car jumped forward. I careened around the next corner, running flat out now, my tie flapping over my shoulder. I spotted a narrow gap between two houses and made a beeline for it, praying the car couldn't follow. I squeezed through the hedge, scratching my arms in the branches, stumbling into the backyard beyond. I crouched there, gasping for breath, straining to hear over the blood rushing in my ears. The car screeched to a halt out on the street. A door slammed. Footsteps pounded on the sidewalk. "Where did you go?" a man's voice bellowed. "I saw you come back here." I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound. The footsteps grew closer, crunching on the grass near the hedge. I looked around wildly and spotted a weathered shed in the corner of the yard. Staying low, I scurried over and tried the door. To my relief, it opened. I slipped inside, easing the door shut behind me, just as the man shoved through the hedge. "You can't hide," he snarled, his voice coming closer. "I'm gonna find you." I shrank back into the darkest corner of the musty shed, barely daring to breathe. Suddenly the door rattled, and I bit my tongue to keep from crying out. Through the crack, I could see the man's face peering in, eyes wild, lips curled in a sneer. "I know you're in there," he hissed. "I can wait all night if I have to. You have to come out sometime." I closed my eyes, trembling, and fumbled for my phone again, with shaking hands. This time I didn't hesitate. I dialed 911. It was a cool autumn evening, and I was walking home from my friend's house. We had been studying for midterms and lost track of time. By the time I left, the sun had long since set, and the streets were empty. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. The houses all looked the same, with neatly manicured lawns and picket fences. It was the sort of place where you felt safe walking alone at night. As I made my way down the sidewalk, the only sound was the rhythmic tapping of my shoes against the concrete. The streetlights cast a dim glow, creating pools of light that I stepped through every few paces. I had my hands shoved in my pockets, and my mind was still buzzing with facts and figures from our study session. I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. About halfway home, I suddenly got the distinct feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder, but the street behind me was deserted. There was no one there. I shook my head, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Too many late nights, and too much caffeine. I quickened my pace anyway, eager to get home. As I walked, I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes on me. It felt like someone was tracking my every move, hiding just out of sight. I kept looking back, but I never saw anyone. The street remained empty and silent. A few minutes later, I heard it. The sound of footsteps echoing my own. They were heavy and deliberate, and they were getting closer. My heart started to race, and my palms grew sweaty. I told myself it was probably just another student walking home. But something about the steadiness of the steps unnerved me. I risked another glance back, and this time I saw a figure in the distance, a shadowy silhouette under the streetlights. They were too far away to make out any details, but they were definitely walking towards me. I faced forward again and broke into a jog, my book bag bouncing against my hip. Behind me, the footsteps sped up too, growing louder as they gained ground. They had a strange echo to them, an unnatural loudness that made my skin crawl. I was full on running now, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I didn't want to look back again. I didn't want to know how close they were. I was only one street away from my house when I heard a loud bang, like a gunshot. I nearly tripped in surprise, my eyes going wide. The footsteps behind me had stopped. Slowly, I turned around, my whole body trembling. The street was empty. There was no one there. But lying on the sidewalk, illuminated by the glow of the streetlight, was a smoking shotgun. I stared at it in shock, my mind reeling. And then I noticed something else. A dark liquid splattered on the concrete. Blood. I broke into a sprint, adrenaline flooding my veins. I raced down the street and up the front steps of my house, fumbling with my keys. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I locked the deadbolt and collapsed against the door, my heart slamming against my ribs. I never found out what happened that night. The next morning there was no sign of the gun or the blood. It was like it had never happened. But I can't shake the memory of those echoing footsteps, or the terror I felt. I don't walk alone at night anymore. I'm afraid of what might be waiting for me in the darkness, just out of sight. It was a dark, moonless night, and I was walking home alone from a friend's house. I'd stayed later than I planned, playing video games and losing track of time. By the time I left, it was after midnight. I knew I should have called an Uber, but I figured it was only a 20-minute walk. I could handle it. The streets in this part of the suburbs were quiet and dimly lit. Rows of cookie-cutter houses sat silently, windows dark, everyone asleep. I walked quickly, hands stuffed in my pockets, against the chill. The only sound was the scuff of my sneakers against the sidewalk. A few blocks from home, I got an eerie feeling, like I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced behind me, but the street was empty. "Get it together," I muttered to myself. "You're just spooked because it's late." I picked up my pace, eager to get home. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing my own. I whipped my head around, but still saw no one. My heart started to race. I wasn't imagining it. Someone was following me. I broke into a jog, my breath coming fast. The footsteps sped up too, louder now, closing the distance. I fumbled for my phone, fingers clumsy with fear. I risked a look over my shoulder, and this time I saw him. A figure in a dark hoodie, face obscured. And he was running straight toward me. Panic took over. I sprinted, no longer caring how loud I was. My pursuer matched me step for step. The sound of his heavy breathing mingled with my own ragged gasps. I was only 1 block from home. If I could just make it. I flew around the corner onto my street, legs and lungs burning, praying I'd see the lights of my house. But the street was pitch black. The power was out, every house dark and still. And behind me, those footsteps. That raspy panting getting closer. I stumbled up my front walk, nearly crying with relief when I reached my door. I wrenched it open, hurled myself inside, and slammed it behind me, locking it with shaking hands. I collapsed against it, chest heaving. I was safe. But then I heard the crunch of shoes on gravel, measured footsteps coming up the walk, and the dark silhouette of a man stopped just on the other side of the door. 3 slow knocks rang out. I scrambled back, bile rising in my throat. "What? Who are you?" I managed to get out. "What do you want?" Silence. Then a voice, low and gravelly. "I think you know." Ice flooded my veins, because he was right. Deep down I did know. This was no random attack, no case of wrong place, wrong time. He had targeted me, hunted me, and now he had me exactly where he wanted me, alone and trapped, with no one to hear me scream. It was late, maybe 11 p.m., and I was driving home from a friend's house across town. I don't usually take the back roads, but I thought I'd save some time by cutting through the quiet suburban streets. The houses were all dark, most people already asleep. The only light came from the occasional street lamp, and my headlights cutting through the night. I was about halfway home when I noticed a car behind me. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably just another person heading home late. But as I made a few turns, I realized the car was still there, always keeping the same distance. I started to feel uneasy. I made a random left turn, then a quick right. But the car followed each time. My heart began to race as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I pressed on the gas a little more, trying to put some distance between us, but the car sped up too, matching my pace. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't lead this person back to my house. My mind raced, with possibilities of who could be behind me and what they might want. I decided to make a loop, heading back toward the main road, where there would be more light and maybe a gas station I could pull into. As I made the turn onto the main street, I breathed a sigh of relief. But it was short-lived. The car behind me suddenly sped up, coming right up to my bumper. I could see the headlights glaring in my rearview mirror, nearly blinding me. I panicked, stepping hard on the gas. My car lurched forward, engine roaring, but the other car kept pace, swerving left and right behind me. I flew through a red light, heart pounding in my ears. I thought about reaching for my phone to call 911, but I was too scared to take my eyes off the road for even a second. Up ahead, I saw a police station. The lights were on, and I could see a couple of cruisers parked out front. It was my only chance. I made a sharp turn into the lot, tires screeching, and came to a halt right in front of the station doors. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, hands shaking on the wheel. In my mirror, I saw the car that had been following me. It slowed down as it passed the police station. I couldn't see inside because of the tinted windows, but I swear I saw the brake lights flash, just for a second, before it sped off into the night. I never found out who was in that car, or why they followed me. I sat in the police station parking lot for nearly an hour before I could compose myself enough to drive home. I still think about it sometimes, late at night when I'm driving alone, and I never take those back roads anymore. Because even now, I can't shake the feeling that one day I might see those headlights in my rearview mirror again.